Welcome to the Grow Your Camp podcast, where we share systems and stories to help camps grow because you can't minister to empty beds. I'm Carl.
And I'm Mark.
And we've got a really good episode for you today. We're going to be talking with Kathi and Bob Terrell from Emanuel Pines, just talking through their growth story and also how they got into camp. We're going to really be digging into their transition from about $900,000 of revenue to over $2 million of revenue over a 3-year period. But before we get into that story, I'm going to turn it over to Mark for this week's quick camp marketing tip.
Here we go. This is your Grow Your Camp podcast marketing tip of the week. Rebooking. It's the most affordable path to growth. Hey, camp leaders, welcome back. This week, I want to talk to you about the most affordable path to growth you have available to you, and that's rebooking. So let's start with the question, what's a healthy rebooking percentage for a Christian camp or retreat center? Well, a strong target is somewhere between 60 and 80%. In other words, if a church group comes to your camp with 100 people, you want them rebooking that same date or that same season the following year. Now, you might be wondering, where does the 60 to 80% number come from? Is that an industry standard? Well, here's the honest answer. You probably won't find a published industry benchmark for group bookings the way you'll find one for hotel occupancy or the average daily rate. It's just not tracked that way publicly. But here's what we do know from the broader hospitality world, and that is a hotel is considered healthy if somewhere around 25 to 30% of its business comes from returning guests. Anything above 50% is considered exceptional loyalty. Now, stop and think about that for kind of the context of your camp. A church group, it's not a transient traveler looking for the best deal on Expedia. They have an annual calendar, they have a decision maker, and they've already moved 100 people to your property once, right? So the relational and the logistical switching cost is enormous. Enormous. I think it's enormous, which is exactly why 60 to 80% rebooking is a realistic, and I think it's a healthy target for a well-run camp and retreat center. So if you're sitting below 50%, something is broken. And if you're in the mid-30s, you don't have a market problem. You have a systems problem. So when a group does rebook, it tells you something important. It tells you they had a great experience. Their needs were met. They felt cared for. I remember when I was leading Sandy Cove in Maryland, we had language for this. We wanted every guest to feel what we call was the wave. Welcomed, appreciated, valued, and encouraged. And we actually measured it. We asked those exact questions on our guest survey, and we held ourselves accountable to the answers. Now, let me tell you a quick story that helps shape how I think about this. So years ago, when I was VP of Sales and Marketing at Forest Home, 20 years ago, I was talking with one of our sales folks about a large, long-standing group that hadn't rebooked. It was exclusive. And when I asked why, she said it came down to the food. What was supposed to be hot was cold. What was supposed to be cold was warm. And the quality just wasn't there. So I asked the salesperson, do you mind if I call the pastor? And she said, yeah, good luck. So I called him up and I said, hey, pastor, I understand we really blew it on the food experience at your last retreat. And he laughed and he said, yep, pretty much. And I said, well, I hear you're looking at other places for next year. And he kind of confirmed, yep, they were disappointed and they were moving on. So I said, pastor, have you ever heard the phrase, seasoned sailors are not made on calm seas? And he laughed. And he said, no, but I could use that in a sermon sometime. I said, well, listen, when you tell us what we need to do to get better, it actually makes us better. So I'd like to offer you something I've never offered before. I said, what if you rebook with us and I personally guarantee your food experience will be top shelf, like hot food hot, cold food cold, like quality across the board. And if you're not satisfied at the end of the retreat, I will tear up your check and your group attends free. I'll never forget what he said to me next. He said, young man, do you have the authority to make that offer? And I said, I sure hope so. So I'll get back to you on that. And he said, if you can actually make that offer, we'll rebook. And they did. And you can imagine it was all hands on deck their weekend, and we didn't tear up the check, which is great. So here's why that story matters. Rebooking is what keeps a camp financially healthy and sustainable. And when it drops, you have to be willing to find out why, name it honestly, and do something about it. Let me give an example. Matter of fact, this is about Emmanuel Pines, who you're going to meet, Bob and Kathi, dear friends of ours, and a longtime client with Inspiring Growth. They were hitting about the mid-30s on rebooking when we started working together. And we knew we had to get those numbers at least to 60%. So we built this aggressive rebooking system. We layered in the right incentives, and we tackled the areas of camp that were getting unfavorable ratings. And essentially over the last 2.5 years, they've gone from 35% roughly to almost 60% rebooking. That's real, sustainable, financially healthy. And it came from a willingness to find out what was wrong and set goals and pursue it. So here's your tip for the week. 3 things, actually. 1, know your rebooking percentage. If you don't know, find it this week. Aim for 60 to 80%. Number 2, pursue rebooking immediately with care and with incentive. Don't wait. And 3, never leave a date open beyond 90 days. If a group hasn't rebooked by then, that space is at risk of going empty. And an empty weekend is lost revenue. You would never get back. So rebooking really is the most affordable growth strategy you have. You've already done all the hard work to getting them once. Now care for them well enough so that they can't imagine going anywhere else. And that's your marketing tip for the week. I'll see you next time.
All right, Mark, that was a great tip. And that is also a great segue to our interview. Bob and Kathi, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for
Hi.
joining.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here. I know you know Mark well, and we'll get into that story here in just a second. But so the two of you lead things there at Emanuel Pines Camp. You've gone through a season of significant growth, and I know that took some important leadership decisions, getting outside perspective, developing a strong team. We're very excited to dig into that. But we always like to start with just a quick story from each of you on how did each of you get involved in camp and ultimately what led you to Emmanuel Pines?
Oh, well, I think I was bribed.
Something like that.
We were the pastors down at a church in Phoenix, and the leadership, the conference leadership was looking at making some administrative changes here at Emmanuel Pines. We had already gotten transferred to Prescott to pastor the church up here. And when they made the change at the camp, I asked, so how do you find another camp director? And they said, why, are you interested? And I said, that is not what I said. I was just asking a question. And I started 10 days later, and I had
Wow.
2 weeks to learn everything about the camp. The previous camp directors, it was a family, and they pretty much ran the whole camp. And so when they departed, it took, half of the team along with it. So I had to learn really
Wow.
fast, all things camp. But I had a lot of administrative background to carry that forward. And just I was a hospice chaplain, and so caring for people came naturally to me. So it was
Wow.
it was a natural transition.
Wow.
Yeah, it was. And when she says she had 10 days to learn everything, that's everything from how to do bookings to where all the septic tanks are. And she did an extraordinary she did an extraordinary job just assimilating information and retaining it. I was impressed. Like Kathi said, was a pastor for 39 years. And I remember planting a church just west of Phoenix in 1998. And by 2000, we had about 80 kids from our church who wanted to go to a summer camp. We didn't pick Emanuel Pines. We weren't familiar with it yet. We sent them to another camp here, but I wound up being in charge of all the registrations, driving the van, getting these kids here, stopping and letting them use the restroom and grab Cokes on the way up the hill here. And I was exhausted when I got finished with the whole camp experience. So I went home, and immediately the next day I was in the office, I printed a sign and put it on my office door that said, "Bob, I don't do camp, Terrell." And I nailed that to the outside of my office door. And that rang true for a little bit. I really didn't want anything to do with camp. But when we got transferred up here, we wound up graciously, they allowed us to live in a cabin on site here. And I began to observe what camp really was. I began to observe the kids. I saw the baptisms. I, I, I saw racial divides being destroyed. I saw so many amazing things that really turned my heart back to camp. And watching this lady right here do her thing as an executive director has been one of the most inspiring things that's ever happened to me. So I love camp. I can tangibly see the difference that we make. You know, as a pastor, you don't always get to see the difference that you make, but at camp we do. We see the kids, we hear the worship, we see the nature, and it's just absolutely amazing.
And Bob, what do you guys use to baptize people?
Oh,
we baptize them in a horse trough.
yeah, absolutely. Horse trough. We fill it up full of the coldest water we can find. Well, and, you know, back in the winter, we had some folks who wanted to do baptisms. And it was about 40 degrees outside. And so without Kathi or I asking anything, we set the baptistry up down in what we call our lower field, which is about 100 yards from our kitchen area. And so our maintenance guys went down and started filling the horse trough for baptisms. And all of a sudden, the kitchen staff started a chain of warm water containers going from the kitchen down to the baptistry. And they made that baptistry about 85 degrees when it was 40 degrees outside. It was amazing. It was very cool.
Wow. I just put up a picture of a baptism in that horse trough.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one.
So cool. So, Kathi and Bob, tell us a little bit about Emanuel Pines. Where are you located? Do you do camp? Do you do retreats? And how many beds do you have?
Denominational structure, all that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Emmanuel Pines is owned by the River Conference, which is part of the Free Methodist Church. And we are in central Arizona in Prescott. We sit in the middle of the largest stand of ponderosa pine trees in North America. And we have 65 acres. We have about, I think we have about 33 buildings, and we can, depending on the group, anywhere from about 340 to up to 380 for family, for like a family camp lodging.
And we're a hosting camp. A lot of times when you think about camp, you think, I'm going to send my individual kid to this camp. Well, what we're a little different. We're a hosting camp, which means that we don't do a lot of programming. We provide food, we provide facilities, we provide recreation, and we're beginning to step into the whole programming thing a little bit. We do guided hikes. We do we have 2 giant mammoth water slides here that we do. So we're beginning to, and we do equine experiences. We have 6 equine on site, and we're beginning to dip our toe into programming a little bit, but it's still mostly just those 3 main areas that we focus on.
Yeah. So you guys focus on providing a good environment, helping handle the logistics so the group can come in and run their program their way with their speakers, their focus, their agenda. That's pretty cool.
Correct.
Exactly. Exactly.
So I've heard a lot about your story from Mark, and he mentioned that or when I read through the story, it sounded like at one point, I don't know if this was at the very beginning of your journey there, or maybe it was a little later, but at some point you had kind of plateaued at the camp at
Mhm.
right around, I believe, the 900,000 marker. So take us back to that time. Like, what was going on there, and what did things look like day to day for you at that point, that stage of the camp?
Yeah, when we first started, we were sitting somewhere between 7 and 800,000. And so over, the first 5 to 6 years, we didn't do a whole lot of growth. We all had to navigate COVID during my
Mm,
first 5 years, so that obviously tanked revenues for a
yeah.
good while, and then that took a bit for it to come back around as it did
Mm,
for probably all camps. But then we did see that trajectory start to incline. We were sitting at around 900,000 when we brought Inspiring Growth on board. Um, things were things were a little rough. We had good people, but the vision and the direction was more reactive than proactive. And
mm,
so the facilities, we're coming up on our 80th anniversary. And so the facilities just really needed to be revamped. We were in the middle of another massive improvement. We went through about $1 million over the first 7 years of our tenure, just reinvesting into the camps, new roofs, new flooring, paint. I mean, everything. So
mm,
when we started to get to a point where um, we wanted to be more proactive. We wanted to make sure that the guest experience, first impressions, our team felt valued and appreciated. So we just started being more intentional about that
mm.
direction.
And
Got it.
as a pastor, I was always concerned about what people first experienced when they came into the church. I didn't want them to see dirty windows. I didn't want them to see dirty floors. So I tried to put myself in their situation and walk through the church and go, what am I really seeing and what are potential congregants seeing?
Mm,
And we've done the same thing here at camp. Um, we start at the front gate and we look at absolutely everything and we focus on those areas that we know people are going to gather in, they're going to see, they're
yeah.
going to experience, they're going to smell, they're going to do all kinds of things there. And those are the areas that we have tried to focus on um, for improvements and for first impressions. And it's really made a difference when we try and look at it through somebody else's eyes.
And it's
Yeah.
really fun to have groups that are rebooking. They come back year after year. We were just talking about this yesterday, how it's neat that when they come back, they're excited to see what the new thing is that we did
Right.
over the last 12
Yeah.
months and how much different it looks. Or so that's really exciting and it's encouraging.
And
Yeah.
just that simple fact should let you know that people are watching,
Mhm.
people are
They're paying attention.
experiencing, they're paying attention to whatever you're doing at camp.
Yeah. Yeah. I think campers have a lot of grace, right? They can overlook, a building that's maybe needing some freshening up and those kind of things. But
Mhm.
I think, like you said, when they come back next year and they see, oh wow, they painted that room, or wow, they improved that room, or they built a new lodge, or they expanded the dining hall, like that kind of sends a really strong message. Like, we're here, we're committed to improving things, we're committed to growing things, and I think that's one of those, I want to say, hidden psychological factors, but I don't even think it's hidden. It's very overt that really affects people rebooking. That's pretty cool. So I mean, it sounds like, I mean, you managed to get some growth. You started out you said around the $700,000 range. You were getting some growth. At what point did you realize growth needed to become more of a priority? And like, what were the things that you realized were holding you back?
Wow. Um, I
They
think it was
wanted they
just
wanted a
a lot of it was
raise.
timing.
Well, that too.
Some of it was timing. We were blessed to have some camp mentors here locally who were previous clients of Mark's. And we gathered with some other camp directors regularly, and I would hear their stories about how they were growing. And and so I think I asked him, so how did you do that? Because me doing social media posts like whenever I thought about it just wasn't really working, and I was the only one doing that. We were we were just kind of struggling a little bit to kind of get over that hill. And so when that camp actually closed, their denomination decided to close it, and then they kind of referred us to Mark. And so we had a little conversation, and he said, I think it's a good fit, and we didn't look back. And in the past, I had another business coach, but it was more of a professional, personal coach rather than for the camp growth in mind. So it was time, and I just felt God's leading that there was more, and we wanted to be good stewards of what He had entrusted us with um, here at camp, and it deserved to be shared with other people.
So you guys wanted the growth, you were pursuing the growth, but you started to feel like, hey, we're not growing the same way some of our peers are. I love that you just went out and asked, hey, what are you guys doing different? Right? Sometimes that's the key to figuring things out. And in this case, one of those answers was, hey, you got to talk to this guy, Mark. And we'll get more into that. But Bob, what were you going to say?
I don't know. No. I was just going to say, when we got off the phone with Mark the first time, the first time we had a Zoom call, I looked at Kathi and went, do we really think we can do this? I mean, because I think the projected expectations that Mark laid on us and the potential and the possibility, it fit our faith structure. I mean, I believe we could do it, but man, we're about to get busy.
It was terrifying.
It was a
Yeah.
scary ride there for a little bit until we began to see incredible results.
Wow.
Yeah, growth is
Well,
a
we'll-
double-edged sword. I think that's one of the interesting things I learned from Bob and Kathi. As the attendance began to grow, they had to hire more people and figure out different ways to, use part-timers and the way they attracted people and held them to mission and encouragement. It was like guests are coming in, staff are growing. This is a good trajectory.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Yeah, and I know Mark loves to use the "What's your dancing in the street" number, and he kind of positions that as like, "Hey, if everything went great, where would you want things to be?" And then all of a sudden, that becomes the goal, right? Like that's where we're going for, and that can be fun and scary at the same time.
Yeah, we actually came up with a number, and we passed it so fast that I wanted to change the number, and he was like, "No, no, no, we're not changing the number till next year." But it was exciting. It was definitely exciting.
Wow. Well, let's get into that. What were the key changes that led to that kind of growth? Like, tell us about a little more about that part of the story.
Oh, well, it started with, just the study behind the website and who we're attracting. It started with a rebranding, new website, social media. Those were some of the big things that we had to tackle. It hadn't been done. We had done a new website, but it was like 7 years old at that point, or 6 years old, I think. And it was done by, a friend of a friend who knows a guy at another church kind of thing. And it was fine
Yeah.
for what we had, but it wasn't purposeful.
Yeah.
It didn't have the SEO optimization. We didn't know the audience that we were supposed to be targeting. And so the study behind that was fascinating. The team that does that in Inspiring Growth is really good at it. And so it helped us to know what content was really going to be important, and the layout, and how it presented across different platforms. So that was neat. And I've learned so much through all of that process to help us grow, and how that transfers to different systems. Those were the biggest things. And and again, what Bob said, our first impressions, we started really targeting um, the main road in the highlight areas. What needs to be painted? What needs to be freshened up? Where do we need to make the improvements? Where are we going to get the
Yeah.
biggest bang for our buck?
Right.
So that our guests feel it and see it. And then in addition to that, we've always cared for our team, but we were more intentional about the way that we cultivated um, the relationships and the way that the culture just developed within the team itself. So we started an ICU program. We just intentionally poured into our team, making sure that we had
What is that?
activities.
What's that
Oh,
ICU?
I see you. So that was a program I created last year, and I empowered all of our directors. So our culinary director, our accommodations director, engineering director, as well as the admin team. I equipped them with note cards that said I see you, had a spot for their name and a place for a note or a quote, something about
Hmm.
that person that they were identified as going over and above. And so that we were watching, and then they got
Hold
a
on.
hand.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on. So when I first heard ICU, I thought it was medical.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. I thought it
I
was
see
medical.
you.
I see you there. I acknowledge you. So thank you for that.
Yes. And then we equipped them with both the note cards and then a stack of gift cards. And so they got to give those out anytime they wanted to. They picked one person a week usually. And that meant that there were like 8 of us giving out gift cards every single week. And so
Hmm.
the volume of opportunities that each of the staff had was really high. And so we just walk up and hand them an envelope and said, "We saw you do this. You did a great job." And they just wanted to do stuff. Yeah. So between that and I always make it a point of handwriting cards
Hmm.
and acknowledging our team. And then Bob, he always says he's the highest paid litter picker upper. He goes around camp on his golf cart and he picks up litter, but he also makes a point of stopping and talking to our team to
Yeah.
like, "Hey, how are you doing? You're doing a good job. Is there anything I can do for you?" We just try to be upfront and close to them as they make their way, through each
We
day.
And we have another little thing that we do. Since we have had to up the number of staff that we have, we've kind of developed a new orientation and onboarding process
Hmm.
where we make the mission of the camp, our actual mission statement, we make it very important for them to remember. And our mission statement is very simple: love God, love others, assist in making disciples. And we
Hmm.
do that by removing distractions from people so they can do business with God when they get here. But I always tell people in orientation, it would pay you to remember the mission statement, because I'll go into the kitchen at the busiest moment they have. They're serving 250 people. Everybody's in a panic. Lettuce is flying off the salad bar. And I'll walk up to them and I'll say, "Hey, what's the mission of the camp?" If they look at me while they're restocking onions and they say, "Love God, love others, assist in making disciples," bam, I hit them with a $20 Chick-fil-A card. And, we just try and incentivize them so that they could speak intelligently and purposefully with our guests about who we are as camp.
Yeah. That is so cool. I just want to comment something I'm seeing through your story here is, you were new to camp, but you had some principles. I think it kind of started with your church and the way you tried to greet people and welcome people, and then you brought that into camp and said, "Okay, we learned first impressions at church. Now we're going to do first impressions at camp." And then I love how that then turned into, "Hey, we realize people meet us on our website before they meet us at camp. So now we got to take care of first impressions on the website." And
Correct.
then you started to realize, hey, it's not just us. We have a whole team of people and a growing team of people. They need to carry that same value. So you put intentional systems and structures in place to make that that vision, that mission, those values, and even just those daily practices a habit. Because it's not just you walking around, Bob, or you, Kathi, walking around giving those ICUs. It's your staff is empowered to do that too. But you
Right.
doing it reminds them of it. It makes them feel good. And then, yeah, that's just so cool. Thank you so much for sharing that.
So I just put up on the screen a card that we developed. Bob and Kathi, can you talk about this card and how it's used?
Oh, I'll let you do that.
Yeah, so we developed what we call the peace card. I'm sorry I don't have one in front of me, so I can't give you all the details, but
Can you
it was
see it on the
important.
screen, Bob?
A little bit. I'm
A little
too
bit.
old to see that small.
Okay.
So, but it's just simply a card that helps our staff understand our mission. It gives them something to look at, and there's the mission of the church or the camp. And we talk about you know, what our mission is and how that relates and how that translates into absolutely essential customer service basics. You know, we want people who come to camp to feel peaceful. So we did an acrostic with peace and applied it to the way that we encounter our guests through customer service. P, for example, is to provide exceptional customer service. That means you go above and beyond. You speak to people, you acknowledge people, you look them in the eye, you look good, you smell good, you act like you know what you're doing. We extend warm greetings. We always greet our groups just outside the dining hall before their first meal, and we give them the 411 about the camp. And we make that as warm as we can to make people feel welcome at camp. And the A for attack opportunities to serve, that might raise an eyebrow, and people always say, "What do you mean attack opportunities to serve?" Well, I remember 3 years ago, I had a camp associate, a kid who was weed eating out beside the dining hall, and a lady came to him and said, "Oh my goodness." She recognized him because he had Emmanuel Pines shirt on. Said, "Oh my goodness, my toilet is overflowing in my cabin and I don't know how to stop it." And the guy said, "Well, I've got about 15 more minutes of weed eating to do, and then I'll see what I can do about that for you." And I said, we're changing that culture right now. And I tell people what you do is you drop the weed eater and you immediately attend to that guest need. There's nothing more important than attending to guest needs, no matter how small they are or how big they think they are. You attack that opportunity to serve. You go right then and you get it done, and that's where the C comes in. You commit to solving problems. You see that through, even if you have to engage the engineering department to come and fix something, you go back and you follow up and you make sure you find that guest and you say, "Hey, I hope we exceeded your expectations in fixing that issue." And when we do that, we ensure people feel the hope that Christ offers. People tell us continually, Carl, when they come through the gates at Emmanuel Pines, what do they say? They say, "We feel something different. There's something different about this place." And they're not wrong. There is something different about it. In fact, we've come to call Emmanuel Pines God's pocket because people feel like they can really encounter Christ here because we remove the distractions. We give them the best food that we can give them. We give them the best amenities we can give them. The last thing I need is for a brand new guest to come into one of our lodges and see a long black hair in the bathtub. That's all they'll think about the rest of the weekend. No matter how we nail it with food and they do worship, they're going to say, "Well, that wasn't the cleanest place." So we attend to the little things. The old phrase, "God is in the details." Well, he is. I've been to other camps and I look really closely when I go to other camps and I'll see trash in the ditch. I'll see a cigarette butt over here under a tree. I have trained myself to see those things. And when I go through Emmanuel Pines, I make sure that our guests don't see those things.
And when I
Yeah.
take a walk with Bob and it's only going to take 1 minute to get from here to there, it takes 5 minutes because he's picking
Yeah.
up trash and he's saying hi to people.
Practice in peace. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. That is so cool. I love the way you guys have taken, I'm learning things here about taking things that are important, finding ways to make them real for staff, and just also finding ways to make it easy and practical and easy to remember. That is so cool. Well, how do you guys navigate working together? Your husband and wife, you're helping lead the camp. How do you navigate that relationship? I know out there in our listener base, there's a lot of husband and wife teams. I'm sure it's fun, but I'm sure it's a little hard too. How have you guys learned to navigate that?
Well, we kiss a lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
That helps a lot.
Actually, let me tell you something. I was in Indiana last week with a camp that Bob and Kathi had suggested I chat with, and we were out to dinner, and the camp director prayed, and when they got done praying, I said, "This is what Bob and Kathi do after praying," and there it is. There it is.
That's
You know,
great.
I got to tell you, we've been married a little over 20 years now. We've known each other almost 30 years. And when we finally got married and committed to each other, we did just that. And we have worked together since we got married. Even before we were married, we worked together. But we work together day in and day out. And I don't know of anybody I'd rather spend my time with than my favorite wife. So
It just comes easy.
it's very
And
easy for us.
you know, Bob, for a little while, we've done hospice together. We were both hospice chaplains, so that's why I say caring for people, it just comes naturally to both of us, and being, you know, having pastors' hearts. But you know, he retired from pastoral ministry, and then he was kind of dabbling in working here at the camp for me and doing some things, but then they reappointed him to the camp, and we've just, over the last couple of years, we've just gravitated to, okay, you do this and I'll do this. And I made him the director of operations. He handles the HR stuff. He does the yucky stuff I don't want to do. So, and it just works. You know, so yeah.
Yeah, it
And
does.
we try to be, we moved out, we live on site. And so for a long time we lived up front here in one or a couple of different staff houses. The last 2.5, 3 years, we lived at the office in the, what they used to call the director's house. And it was just always expected that the director was up front. And for a long time, I felt like we had to be. And so now we have a team around us. We have the right people in the right places. And we were able to move. We own a little cabin here on site. We were able to move back into our house that's on the back side of camp. And we were able to start going home. We
Wow.
hadn't been able to go home for 7 years. And so now we get to go home, and it makes a difference to protect our time. We started traveling more the last 2 years, and because we have the right people in the right places and the right positions, I never used to even leave camp. If there was a guest on site, we never left. And I used to say if I got to the main road, I was out on good behavior. Um, because that's what it felt like sometimes. But now we, you know, we're starting to preserve our peace and our own time more effectively.
And I'll
Yeah.
tell you one quick story that helped facilitate the move from the office house back into our own house. The door to our house here in the office house is right beside the actual camp office door.
Okay.
So back in the house one day, I'd just gotten out of the shower and I thought, shoot, I left something that I needed to go into the laundry room and grab. So I wrapped my towel around me real fast and I walked out the bedroom down the hallway and I've got a towel around me. I'm dripping wet. And here's two ladies going, "Hi, we're here to check in." And they're standing in my living room. So it was like, it's time to do something about this. And that happened on more than one occasion, to be quite honest with you. So, yeah, when that happened, I'm like, it's time to start remodeling our house and go home.
I don't know, Bob. Maybe that's why people keep coming back.
Oh, maybe
It's
they do.
Bob. It's seen Bob.
I'm willing to
Hey,
model for that.
um, Bob and Kathy and I share the travel, just getting away, going places. Sometimes we meet actually at different places. One thing we skipped over, could you guys talk about the virtual sales uh, aspect of the growth uh, for you guys? Talk a little bit about
Hmm.
what that was, how you decided to do it, and the results of that.
Well, I didn't exactly know what that was going to look like, and it was a little scary to have someone doing virtual sales that
Wasn't on site.
wasn't on site. We weren't really sure what that was going to look like and feel like, but when we found out who it was going to be, and that her history, it was her and her husband used to be the directors at a local camp, and that he was actually one of my camp mentors. It put my heart at ease because I knew that she knew what it was, what needed to
Hmm.
happen. And so that made it a whole lot easier to entrust that and to hand that over, being strategic and being a little bit more responsive because that's her only position with us rather than having my local executive assistant, being torn into so many different directions. So it was very targeted, whereas with our executive assistant, she was helping with the finance stuff, she was helping with team acknowledgments, answering phones, emails, all of that. And that's where we saw tremendous growth in that because the responsiveness was there, and with the other tools that were implemented, with the website and the virtual tour and the online forms, all of those things contributed to the virtual sales success.
Yeah.
And this is what I think is so divine. I lean into relationships. I would rather be in relationship first than a business transaction. And Kathy and I became fast friends. I was going through some struggles myself, and they actually leaned in with a pastor's heart to my
Hmm.
story. And I still remember when you guys were going through Southern California and you texted me and goes, "Hey," or no, you posted something on Facebook and I was like, "You're right around the corner." And they came over to our place and it was just life giving. But uh, the person who's doing virtual sales from Inspiring Growth for Bob and Kathy is Heather Trail. And you go, who's Heather Trail? Well, Heather and her husband ran a camp, the one that closed down because the denomination didn't want it anymore. And our team decided to fly out to Prescott, do a chef's table experience with just them and a few people, and just had a retirement party for
Hmm.
Jen. And I'll never forget Heather. She's older than me. She leaned across the table and she goes, "Mark, Jim might be ready to retire, but I'm not." And she said, "Do you have anything with Inspiring Growth that I can help with?" I said, "Maybe, I don't know." And I realized I spent 3 years training her on sales at her camp and the HubSpot system. And then all of a sudden, Bob and Kathy and I are talking, and I just said to Heather, "What if," she moved to Texas? And I said, "What if you did the sales back in Prescott?" She was like, "What does that mean?" And I
Hmm.
said, "You eat what you kill. You get paid for results. This is not a staff position. You are going to set up your own business and you're going to be with our team." And she was like, "Let's do it." And so she is instrumental in going from 900,000 to 2
Mhm.
million.
Very
Hmm.
much so. I was a little skeptical about that at first because I'm a control freak to a certain degree. But when I knew it was going to be Heather, and just to see the load that it took off of us collectively as an administrative staff, to have somebody do nothing but focus on bookings was phenomenal.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah,
That's
Yeah.
and
cool.
in over the last 3 years, Heather, that relationship has just gotten better and better to the point where, she doesn't have to call me. I give her a lot of freedom to navigate groups, to offer, special pricing or a discount if she feels like it's warranted or for whatever reason. Um, unless it's just way in left field, she'll call. But I trust her explicitly
Yeah.
to manage those bookings, because I also know she understands camp and she understands the heart behind it. And so it really helped to not just have an administrator who knew how to go through the motions. She understood the heart and the philosophy.
And that was just one more part. I mean, what I love about your story, we always ask about the results. We know the financial results. You went from that 900,000 to now over 2 million over about a three-year period. You did that. You also helped improve the guest experience. And we heard from Mark at the beginning when he shared your example about how that affected your rebooking rate. But I also love that, like, for the camp directors that are listening, it wasn't just about getting more results for the camp. You guys are creating a long-term leadership journey, right?
Mhm.
Like, you can go the distance because you've made the changes so that you're not in the front office and on all the time and feeling like you got out for good behavior just because you step off the camp for an hour, and to the point where you can actually go home in a different place on the property. Like, just so many cool results, and you have a strong team. I mean, we can hear that through everything that you've said. So that is just so cool. I love when the results, I just feel like that's the way God works, right? It's not just financial, it's not just relational, it's not just personal. It's everything and everything. Like, when we let him do the work, it just works. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you actually kind of spoke about this already, but I want to honor Bob at WCRC, Williamsburg Christian Retreat Center. We interviewed him a week or so ago, and we've started to ask our guests, and we're going to ask you this too for a question. But we asked him, "What's the question you want us to ask the next director?" And it was perfect because you guys are a married couple. He said, "I want to ask them, what do you do to keep your marriage fresh?" And you guys give us a little peek into that, but give us a specific answer. So in the midst of everything camp, how do you guys keep your marriage fresh?
Yeah, like I said, we try to travel. We are intentional about our spiritual connection. We pray together.
Mm,
That's fundamental. It's every day, and we protect our time alone as much as we can, as best as we can. Being
Wow.
camp directors, you feel like the phone is always on. But when we've started traveling this last 2 years, and being able to silence the notifications and let them do the things. Um, we're both a little type A, so that was hard, but
yeah.
nothing burned down. We went on a cruise, we went to Belize, and nothing burned down, and it was fine. So I
Yeah.
think that was just, we've been like honeymooners since the beginning.
Mm,
So I
Make
think,
our kids sick.
yeah, I think it just comes pretty naturally to us. Um, and we can say that, some people say marriage is hard. And that's when we look at each other and we go, what?
What?
Why is it hard? Because it's just,
mm,
we were both married before. And I think we have just such a greater appreciation for one another that really changed who we are and how we love each other and
Yeah,
how we care about one another.
yeah, and the only time we ever have a little bump is when we're trying to both park the RV. It's the only time. So,
All right, so let's turn the tables now. What the next director we interview? What question should we ask them?
I thought about that for a little bit, and um, I think I would ask, based on our trajectory and how we grew and how we got stuck for a little bit, I would ask them what are you tolerating right now and what needs to change?
Hmm, that's so good. What are you tolerating right now, and what needs to change? That's so good. Well, Bob and Kathi, thank you so much for joining us today. I knew your story was going to be good, but I heard a lot of things I didn't expect to hear, and it was so good. Thank you so much. Thank you
It
so
was the
much.
kissing part, wasn't it?
yeah, it was.
Yes, that was perfect. We're going to make that the thumbnail for the video. That'll be
All
great.
right.
Oh my
Great.
gosh, that is a great idea, Carl. Well, Carl,
Well,
Kathi, thank you again so much for investing in each other investing in the kingdom, and modeling for me what love can look like when you work together with somebody. I'm so grateful for that. And for you fellow camp leaders, I just want to say thank you for joining us on Grow Your Camp podcast. But thank you for creating unforgettable, real life outdoor experiences for an anxious generation glued to their screens. What you do matters, because we can't minister to empty beds. So, man, let's grow together. And before you roll, do us a favor, like or subscribe or share one of these episodes with a friend. Carl told me this morning, lots of people are listening to this, which, I mean, we're doing this because we both have marketing agencies and we just wanted to work together and have fun and tell stories and talk about systems. But share it. And also, if you'd like to ask a question that we can use on the podcast, just go to our website, growyourcamppodcast.com. Click on submit your topic button. And it's kind of a recording. So don't be shy. Just go in there and say, here's my question. Here's my name. This is my camp. Here's my question. And we might use it on a future episode of the podcast. And phew, man, we're doing this for you because you're doing what you do for others. And isn't that kind of the whole purpose? That we do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind regard one another as more important than ourselves. Philippians 2. So thanks again for listening to the podcast on behalf of Carl and me. Hey, let's grow camp together.